Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Geometry Dash Concepts. It's been a while since I've said that. Today, I have another idea for a new type of block that I think would be pretty cool. Most of you are probably able to pick up how it works from the preview, but I'll explain in case you didn't. Directional blocks function as normal solid blocks until you move in their specified direction, in which case they'll disappear and allow you to pass through them. However, once you stop moving in that direction, they'll return back to their solid state. At first, it may seem that the blocks turn on and off depending on whether the player is holding down their mouse or not. However, that's actually not what's happening, and the blocks actually are controlled by the player's velocity rather than mouse input. To detect what direction the player is moving in, I use 3 collision blocks that follow the player's vertical movement. I added a tiny delay to the one in the center, allowing it to lag behind and collide with the other 2 blocks that it's sandwiched between. I was then able to use the collision block data to determine which direction the player was moving in. This is slightly more difficult to build than the previous concepts I've shown, but it's still not that hard. Step number 1 is to place the blocks in. First, place solid blocks wherever you want the directional blocks to be. It doesn't matter what block it is, all that matters is that it's a solid block that you can tell apart from the other blocks in your level. I'll be using this block, and I'll put my directional blocks in these places. You may want to color code the blocks so you can tell the up blocks apart from the down blocks. I chose green for up and purple for down, but you can choose whichever colors you want. Next, add all the up blocks to group 1 and all the down blocks to group 2. Step number 2 is to place the collision blocks in. Start by placing a block towards the beginning of the level. Set its block ID to 1, add it to group 3, and make sure it has dynamic block enabled. Place a second collision block above it, set its block ID to 2, add it to group 4, and leave dynamic block disabled. Place a third collision block below the first one, set its block ID to 3, add it to group 5, and again leave dynamic block disabled. Lastly, select the first block you place down, which should be the block in the middle, and scale it to 95% size. These 3 blocks will allow us to detect the player's velocity. Step number 3 is to place the follow triggers in. You may want to go to a different layer to do this in order to make your life easier. At the beginning of the level, place down a follow player Y trigger. Set the target group ID to 3, set the delay to 0.02, and set the move time to as much as possible. Next, place down another follow player Y trigger at the beginning of the level. Set the group ID to 4, set the offset to 10, and set the move time to as much as possible. You can leave the delay at 0. Lastly, place down a normal follow trigger at the beginning of the level. Set the target group ID to 5, set the follow group ID to 4, and set the move time to as much as possible. Now, the collision blocks will follow the player's vertical movement, with the middle block lagging slightly behind. Step number 4 is to place down the collision triggers. First, place a collision trigger at the beginning of the level. Set block A to 1, set block B to 2, and set the group ID to 2 as well. Next, make a clone of the trigger and move the clone 1 space below it. Then, take the Activate Group and Trigger on Exit options in its Edit menu. Next, copy and paste the 2 collision triggers that we've made thus far. Move them below the other 2 triggers. Keep everything the same except for the block B ID and the target ID. Set the block B ID to 3 and set the target ID to 1. If you've done everything right, the 4 collision triggers you've placed down should look like this. Step number 5 is to hide the collision blocks. This step is pretty simple. Since the collision blocks at the beginning of the level are still visible, we need to make them invisible so our level doesn't look stupid. Place down 3 alpha triggers at the beginning of the level that set the alpha groups 3, 4, and 5 to 0. Make sure the fade time is set to 0 as well. If all went well, the block should work if you play your level. If you're still having problems, then feel free to leave a comment describing your issue. I'll do my best to help. I'll show you how I designed the blocks in the preview, but it goes without saying that you can use whichever design you like. The blocks you saw in the preview were made from these 3 objects. The first 2 objects can be found in the Blocks tab, and the third object can be found in what I assume is a Decoration tab. Simply merge the objects together and change the layering if necessary. Also, since none of these blocks are solid, you'll need to put an invisible solid block behind all of them. I'm aware that this looks very similar to one of my designs for the weight block. If you're using both directional blocks and weight blocks in the same level, then I'd recommend you either use the X design I featured for the weight block or use a different design of your own. So far, the blocks have been popping in and out of existence, which is kind of boring. If you want to spice things up a little bit, you can add effects to the blocks when they're toggled on or off. You can have them fade in and out, have them remain slightly opaque, or make them darken when toggled off. I'm not going over how to build these since it would simply take too long. However, this ID will take you to an unlisted level where I use the effects so you can check out how they work. But anyways, that is how you make a directional block.